I bet you would have never guessed that Michael Strahan, former New York Giant great Hall of Famer for the NFL, would not be the quote unquote journalist that would ask the best questions of the Kamala Harris campaign. But indeed, that's the crazy world. That's the upside down world that we're living in right now. Tim Walz is an absolute liability to the Kamala Harris campaign. And I can't believe that I'm saying that because Kamala Harris is a liability to the Kamala Harris campaign. But I want to play you the questions. Some of the questions that went viral that Michael Strahan asked Governor Tim Walz, and he was unable to answer these effectively. I believe this: the more Kamala Harris gets out, they're in a lose-lose situation, right? Kamala Harris and Tim Walz weren't giving any interviews because Kamala Harris's campaign was scared that she would be an absolute disaster out on the campaign trail, and they're right. She has been a disaster. Her interview with Howard Stern didn't go well. Her interview with The View didn't go well, where she basically has been running a campaign where she's been trying to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. And then she goes on The View and says, oh, she can't think of anything. When Sonny Hostin asked her the question, what separates you from Joe Biden? I'm paraphrasing. And she was like, oh, there's nothing that I can think of right now. This lady is a complete and utter disaster. So none of these interviews are working for her. She went on Colbert, sipped a beer with him, Miller Lite, trying to win Wisconsin. But right now, at least in the Real Clear Politics polling averages, she is behind Trump in 6 swing states. That does not mean that Trump is going to win. So please, people, do not rest on your laurels. It just means that she's not doing near as good as many people believed on the Democrat side believed that she would. In other words, the thrill is gone. This fairy tale, I can't even explain it. This high, this Kamala Harris high that so many Democrat voters were on has totally gone away. Her numbers are completely stagnant. We see Trump gaining ground in some areas. And so it's not looking good for Kamala Harris right now. If the election were held today, I believe Trump would win. The problem, the election isn't going to be held today, and the Democrats have a great ground game. So we have to keep in mind that they're running, the Democrats have a machine. We have a better candidate. They have a better machine. And so even with Kamala Harris being as bad as she is, all right, it doesn't mean that she will lose. So we have to keep our foot on the gas, so to speak. But I do want to share with you, we're going to go video after video of Tim Walz. And I believe that as bad as Kamala Harris is, I believe that Kamala Harris is a liability to the Kamala Harris campaign. Tim Walz is I didn't think I would say this initially, even though I thought he was bad. Excuse me. He's a bigger liability to Kamala Harris's campaign. She had an opportunity to pick Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania that I think would have probably, I don't know that it would have won her the election, but certainly I think she'd be in a better predicament than she is now. But she was too insecure to pick Josh Shapiro. Plus, he was Jewish. So he was too smart and too Jewish for her to pick him. So this is what she's left with. Gabe, let's just roll them one after one. I'll react to each video. Let's go ahead. Video clip number 1, poor favor.
Vice President Harris was asked this week on The View if she would have done anything differently than President Biden that he has done in the past 4 years. And she said, quote, "There is not a thing that comes to mind." And she later said she would have a Republican in her cabinet.
Yeah.
And when it comes to President Biden and the presidency, would you or do you see anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, and look, as a governor, I was asked to be governor of this state when Donald Trump was president and when Joe Biden was there. And I watched Donald Trump dismiss the COVID pandemic. I watched him drive an economy into the ground. And I watched Joe Biden and Kamala Harris pick those pieces up. And I think for all of us, we make decisions, we reanalyze afterwards. I think the thing that drew me to this ticket, and I think what the vice president's talking about, is that her values on these hasn't changed. They have been working for the middle class. They've been doing all they can to make sure prices come down. They're protecting reproductive care.
So it makes me want to ask you, do you think that Biden's done everything right?
Well, look, I don't know if any of us do everything right, but I can tell you he's done everything in the best interest of the American public.
Okay. I had forgotten the question, not even going to lie to you, until Michael Strahan came back, circled back around and said, hey, okay, so are you saying that that Biden has done everything right? All of that gibberish that Tim Walz was speaking, he never answered the question. And I'm telling you, as we get closer and closer to the election, as long as Trump can focus and pinpoint this stuff, this is not going to bode well for the Democrat Party. They cannot answer a question straight on. And ask yourself why. They're the incumbents. Kamala Harris is running as the underdog. They're not the underdogs. Trump is the underdog. Kamala Harris is the incumbent. She's the incumbent. And I know it's somewhat different. I get it. Vice presidents don't normally win after the president has left, right? Vice presidents don't normally win when they run for office after the president that they served are gone. But she's in a different situation. We haven't experienced what we've experienced with Joe Biden, where she participated in a coup to kick him out of office. All right, we haven't experienced that. So by all intents and purposes, Kamala Harris is the incumbent president right now because we know Joe Biden is not there. All right. Although it seems like he has been taking his medicine lately because he's been much clearer. He's been much clearer in front of the press than she certainly has, which makes me wonder if he's trying to undermine her campaign. But that's a subject for another day. Gabe, let's go to the next video. Por favor.
And let's talk about the economy. That is the top issue for voters out there. 74% of voters said the past year they've had to cut back on groceries because of the rising costs, of course. And a lot of those voters, they're concerned that they cast their vote for Kamala Harris, but she's responsible for that. Yeah. So how do you reach those voters? What do you say to those voters who may blame her for the economy right now?
Yeah, folks in the middle. Well, we talk to them about what are the policies that are going to make a difference. And we see some of the data, but data doesn't impact people in their daily lives. Go into the grocery store and you see false information, whether it's bird flu impacting eggs. But the reality for most people is if those costs are up, they want to know what you're going to do about it. I think that's why she's focusing on making sure whether it's home ownership more affordable, tax cuts for the middle class, and let's just be candid about this price gouging piece of this.
Okay, so home ownership, she's gonna help with price gouging. Why hasn't she done that? She's been in office for nearly 4 years. Why hasn't she done that? Why has it taken so long for Kamala Harris to focus on the pain of the middle class, to focus on the pain of those that are suffering under the Biden-Kamala Harris economy? The truth of the matter is she doesn't know what she's doing, and she doesn't intend to make the economy better for those that are in the working class. She intends to make the economy better for the donor class. The idea of price gouging is an absolute and utter joke. We've seen how it's worked in socialist countries. The fact of the matter is it simply doesn't work. A lot of the grocery stores inside of the United States are working on a margin of just over 1% and maybe 1.5%, some upwards of 2%. I think when it comes to meat, it's anywhere from 4 to 6%. In other words, they hardly make a profit. And she's talking about price gouging instead of government spending. The reason why you're suffering under the Biden-Kamala Harris administration is because the government spent too much of your doggone money. And this is what Kamala Harris is afraid to say. She's a big government socialist. Her solutions are always government oriented. They are not generous. They are not kind. They are not compassionate. All she's doing is saying, I'm going to take more money from you to bless you. How are you going to take more money from me to bless me, fool? It doesn't even make sense. But unfortunately, academia, our grammar, from grade school all the way through college, has literally made a lot of students' minds of mush when it comes to civics, when it comes to basic economics 101. Let's play the next video clip. Por favor, Gabe.
They were saying that, hey, these are policies that Kamala Harris could have done 3 years ago when she was in the White House with President Biden, and she never did. What do you say to people who bring that up?
Well, Donald Trump had 4 years to do it, if you're going to talk about that. And what the point is, you need a partner in Congress. You've seen these. We've seen different bills that are ready to pass, and Donald Trump makes sure he steps in. We saw it around immigration, a bipartisan bill, widely respected, wanting to make a difference in this, holding true to our values, securing the border. Donald Trump steps in and says, look, that's going to hurt my political future. Let's not make it happen.
Okay, I want you guys, for those of you that have a brain, I want you to contemplate that. I want you to contemplate that answer and that question. Michael Strahan wisely asked, you've been in office. Kamala Harris has been in office. Why didn't you do that now? Why hasn't she done all the things that she said she's going to do? He goes to this bill, this border bill when it comes to Trump. Guys, let me just ask you a basic question. I want you to share this with your liberal friends. All right. Actually, I'll just make a statement. Trump doesn't have any power because Trump isn't in office. He can't make congressmen do anything. They're going to go based upon the whims of their constituents. It's as simple as that. Congressmen that thought the border bill was bad would say, "Nah, we're not having it." Congressmen that thought it was a good idea would say, "Yeah, we're for it." But here's the thing that you need to know about that bipartisan border bill. First off, it was one senator that participated with that bill. All right, I mean James Lankford of Oklahoma, just lost respect for the guy for this because all he did was gave the left a talking point. That bill would have allowed 1.8 million illegal aliens to come into our country every single year. 1.8 million. That's on top of the 1 million legal immigrants. So we would have had 1.8 million people that could legally cut in front of the legal immigrants that were applying. They could come through ports of entry. That's not a border bill. That's not a bill that was going to stop the flow of illegal immigration. That was a border bill that was going to maintain and make it law for illegals to be able to invade our country. All right, let's go to the next clip.
And you call yourself a knucklehead. Call yourself a knucklehead because you've made some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong. Yeah. But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools, on an instance there. Proud of the service that I've done. Proud to be a teacher in that classroom. Proud to have been very public all these years and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think what you see here, you saw it in Minnesota. I've been elected 8 times here. These things have been very public for folks here. They see the results of things that we pass. We see a state that's a top 5 state for business. We see 3rd best state, top 3 state for raising a child. And we've got the best health care. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial. See, Xi Jinping is doing a good job during COVID, as Donald Trump said. And I think those lessons learned over a lifetime of being very public, whether it's in the classroom or being elected.
Yeah, we're not going to put dictators on speed dial. We're just going to watch what they do and implement those same policies here inside of the United States, like Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has done in his own state. Minnesota is now a disaster under Governor Tim Walz. This guy was too much of a freaking coward to do anything during the George Floyd riots. He allowed one of the police stations to just burn to the ground, told the police officers, hey, let your headquarters in Minneapolis just burn to the ground. There's a video out there of this. His wife talked about how she remembers opening their windows and smelling the burning tires while people's lives, businesses were being destroyed, residences were being destroyed, people were being harmed on the street. That's who Tim Walz is. They went from having a surplus before him to having a major deficit in the state of Minnesota. This fool went to Hong Kong. He went to China 15 times. Why? This guy is actually a liability. Kamala Harris, the worst thing that she could have done besides run for president is pick him as her vice presidential candidate, because this guy is a complete and utter disaster. And he didn't own up to any of the lies that he mentioned, whether it was carrying weapons of war, whether or not he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre. He was caught. And the people in Minneapolis didn't bother to do the research then. He was caught. That's the only reason he had to cop to it. All right. Let's play the next video, Gabe. How many more do we have? Okay, let's roll it.
But it's one thing to trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him even tell the truth about himself. Yeah. What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment. But I think what they see is if they want to compare that talking about immigration policy or seeing the things that Donald Trump would say, I think there's a big difference than missing a date when you're there. And again, spinning something for a political reason. I'm very clear of who I've been. I'm very proud of 24 years of doing that work. And I think going to Congress and working for veterans, they want to see it and make the difference, look a little different. I think people in Minnesota, my students, the folks I've worked with, members of Congress, they know who I am. And they know the policies we put in place have made an impact.
Oh, I forgot the DUI lie. All right, this is one of the reasons, or the reason, that he got fired from his assistant coaching job. Not a coach, an assistant coaching job is what he got fired for because there was because he was arrested for DUI. He lied about that too. This guy is just a habitual liar. He's a fake. He's a fraud. If he becomes a vice president of the United States, God help us. And the same could be said about Kamala Harris, right? God help us right now. She's been a disaster. Biden has been a disaster. And Biden has been, if you've seen Biden in press conferences lately, he's more coherent than Kamala Harris, and he has dementia. All right. Let's play that next video, por favor. Gabe he doesn't speak. I've been saying por favor for some of you that may be tuning in for the first time. By the way, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast, The Carl Jackson Show, all things social media at Carl Jackson Show or at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. So please, please go there. But some of you may be wondering, Gabe happens to be Puerto Rican, and his Spanish isn't as good as mine. So he's been saying por favor. And so I say por favor. So I just want to correct the record. So I'm trying to help Gabe with his Spanish. So it's por favor. It's por favor, Gabe. You're welcome. It's por favor, Gabe. Just, I don't know. Sometimes I don't want you to embarrass your people. So por favor, next video.
But it's one thing to trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him even tell the truth about himself. Yeah.
Oh, we just played that one, Gabe. All right.
And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I've sat in the room with the Sandy Hook folks, a friend with David Hogg, who's been an activist on this. People know in that, and then that gets spun in that, well, he didn't say something true. It was very clear that I was talking about these veterans, very clear that I wear, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being vice president of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it. And I think what you see is as someone who's been in classrooms a lot, I've been around coaching a lot, I speak passionately, and I think doing that, you need to combine the two, and I think that's what she's referring to.
All right, so here's the takeaway from that. Every time he speaks passionately, he can't help but to lie. So if he were to become vice president, he's going to be as president of the Senate, he's going to be overseeing a lot of passionate political issues. Should we expect that the Biden Harris or the Harris Walz administration are going to lie every time they're passionate? This guy is a disaster. Honestly, I have such a feeling of fear and relief at the same time, knowing that he's the vice presidential pick. The fear is if Harris and Walz get into office, I think our economy is going to tank like we've not experienced before, even as bad as it has been. I think censorship is going to increase. I think persecution of Christians and conservatives is going to increase. But also, I have a sense of relief in knowing that Kamala Harris is so bad and Tim Walz are so bad that even more low information voters will pick up on this and say, you know what? I'm not a fan of Trump. I don't like Trump, but these two are a disaster. We can't have them in office. Next clip, por favor, Gabe.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. Mm-hmm. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
Okay, this was such an important follow-up question when it comes to Michael Strahan. I got to give the guy props. He did an excellent job. I would have had a few more questions, frankly, but perhaps given the time that he had, he did the best he could. But honestly, it's been the best interview that I've seen with one of them. So he asked at the end the follow-up question. Basically, do you disagree with Kamala Harris on this? And he's like, Tim Walz is like, I agree with the campaign. I think in a sense, Michael Strahan put him in his place. Like, look, fool, we got an election to win, because, he's a liberal too. But look, fool, we got an election to win. You shouldn't be the white dude that's trying to overstep the black female, So I think there's a little bit of that going on. But let's talk about this electoral college real quick. The electoral college is absolutely crucial if smaller states don't want to lose their voice. All right. If you don't want to be run by dictators, if you don't want California, New York, Texas, and Florida to decide every election, the electoral college is crucial. And by the way, it is a lie that every vote isn't counted when it comes to federal elections. It's the complete opposite. Every vote is counted. Every voice is heard. Our system is, if your candidate wins the popular vote, it's a democracy in the states. If your candidate wins that popular vote, then your candidate wins the electors for that vote. So it's actually, we decide on the electors when we vote. Those electors are what gives the president the real victory with the electoral college. But we get to decide which candidate wins in our state. That's just a complete and utter lie. Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, she wants it too. She's just not as dumb as him to come out and say it, that she wants to abolish the electoral college. They would like nothing more than for us to be run by a bunch of people that don't know what the hell is going on using the popular vote. Look at California. It's a disaster. Look at New York. It's a disaster. Florida and Texas are run well. But I would say this, even with Florida and Texas, that's not America. We don't want a couple of states or a few states deciding the elections for the entire country. We don't want to give up the cultures or destroy the cultures that exist in small swing states, or smaller swing states, whether it's Pennsylvania, whether it's Michigan, Ohio used to be one of them, Arizona, Georgia. We want those states to have their own cultures. We can travel and see different parts of the United States that we can thoroughly enjoy, because they're not run like California. They're not run like New York. So the electoral college wouldn't just destroy our democratic republic or democracy inside of the United States. It would destroy a lot of cultures, different cultures, and different traditions in other states that when you travel, you absolutely enjoy. All right, let's go ahead and roll the next one. Poor favor, Gabe.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the electoral college needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night.
Oh, we played this one. That was it? Okay. All right. Well, listen, guys, that was the last one. So I just want to say kudos to Michael Strahan. I mean, I give him props. I really believe that this was the best interview that we've seen thus far with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And frankly, I don't think, as bad as Tim Walz was, I don't think Kamala Harris could have done a better job. She's an absolute disaster. And shame on the media. As good as Michael Strahan was in this interview, shame on the media that, frankly, former NFL player, and he's a smart man, obviously, but gives the best interview that these presidential candidates should have. That's an indictment on the Kamala Harris campaign, the Harris-Walz campaign, and they're trying to hide stuff from you, and you should not let them get away with it. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Por favor. Sorry, I messed up. Gabe, listening to Gabe again. All right, so por favor, and all things social media at The Carl Jackson Show or at Carl Jackson Show. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you. Peace.